Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, I had a voice of radio. So today, we're going to be looking at Mimikyu and Gengar Tag Team GX. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been looking at these Tag Team GXs over the past couple of weeks. And I brought you a video of a Pikachu and Zekrom deck that was winning. I brought you a video about a Magikarp and a Wailord deck that was doing very well. I brought you a video about a Celebi and Venusaur deck that was doing very well. What I have not done is brought you a video about a Mimikyu and Gengar deck doing well. Not before today. And the reason, very simply, was I didn't have one. But you know that the lovely Code64X over on Twitter hooked us up with one, so now we can have a little bit of a gander at a Mimikyu and Gengar Tag Team GX deck that did well. Yes, the Tag Team GXs are crushing in Japan right now. And of course, we need to start with a stem of the deck. It's Mimikyu and Gengar Tag Team GX, although I'd like to think you guys could have figured that one out. Now, 240 HP is huge. The weakness to Zoroark seems like a problem. Except it might not actually be that bad, because we've got a little bit of disruption here. And you are one-hit KOing with Gengar and Mimikyu. And, of course, you can get immunity for a turn with a GX attack. And, well, I'm going to ruin the surprise, right? We got Sudowoodo. And the thing about Sudowoodo is it limited their bench to 4, which means they can only do 200. Now, a Choice Band, they will still get a KO, but at least it gives you a chance. And look, we got backup attackers here. We should be okay. So what do we actually see here? Well, the main attack for 2 Psychic Energy does 50 damage for each trainer card in your opponent's hand, which basically does one of 2 things. Either it means you do lots of damage, yay, or it means your opponent has to play their trainer cards before they want to play their trainer cards, in their faces. And that is where Garbodor comes in. Now, a lot of you mentioned this when I did my previous video, and you're all, of course, absolutely correct. Garbodor plays Psychic Energy, so it fits very well in this deck, which plays Psychic Energy. And it does 20 damage for each item card your opponent has in a discard. And at this point, you're basically forcing your opponent into a super awkward situation. Either they play the item cards, and Garbodor does an extra 20 damage, or they don't play the item cards, and Mimikyu and Gengar does an extra 50 damage. I know, right? And that is generally the theory of this deck. It is a straightforward 2 Pokemon deck. Now, we've got some others, we'll look at them in a moment. But in terms of the attackers here, it's extremely straightforward. All we're doing here is just attacking with Gengar or Garbodor, depending on the circumstance. And look, if you're against a Zoroark deck, maybe you can afford to be rolling with Mimikyu and Gengar. And you'll probably get a one-hit KO. But it is one of those you can't really rely too much on it. But not every deck is a Zoroark deck, and when you're not against a Zoroark deck, you're fine. There's some things like Blacephalon that can get a one-hit KO, but again, Blacephalon is a counter, and you need to play accordingly. Focus on Garbodor, for instance, or take out their Naganadel, so that they can't get enough energy on the field, or whatever. So, what do we see here then, other than those 2? Well, I should mention Mimikyu and Gengar's Tag Team GX attack. It's a rather nice attack, and what it does for 1 Psychic Energy, your opponent cannot play any cards from their hand during their next turn. Basically gives you a turn where you guarantee if they don't have the KO on board, they ain't getting a KO. But if there's 2 Psychic Energy, then you both draw until you got 7 cards in hand. You get set up, they hopefully draw more trainer cards, so you do a bit more damage the following turn. And look, once per game, if you're trading 2 prizes for free, it's not necessarily the worst thing ever, especially when Garbodor is going to come and start cleaning up. But there are a couple of other Pokemon we see here. We see Malamar. You don't need much Malamar here. You need very little Malamar. But Mimikyu and Gengar is a 2-energy Pokemon. And you can only attach 1 energy per turn. You need a second energy. Malamar says hello. We obviously see a couple of Tapu Lele just to get yourself set up, search out those supporter cards. Sudowoodo, as I mentioned earlier, and it's not just good against Zoroark. Naganadel Blacephalon decks generally need their full bench of 5. Playing this to limit them to a bench of 4 is kind of hilarious. And then we see one Giratina. Now, this Giratina is nuts. I've been saying it since it was first revealed, and I feel no differently about it now. This Giratina is over the top nuts. Now, free energy 130, and then you have to put 4 damage counters on one of your Pokemon. I mean, look, you're playing Malamar, so you can get the energy on here, which is quite nice. But if it's in a discard, you can put it on your bench, and then put 1 damage counter on 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Just gets a bit of extra damage out. And then you attack with it, and your opponent KOs it, and then you get a bit more damage out. And it's just a way of getting a bit of damage on the board while also having a good non-GX attacker. Because you'll notice that Mimikyu and Gengar is good when they've got trainers in hand, but they might not. And Garboda's good if they've got item cards on the discard, but they might not. Well, Giratina just does 130 and there's no mucking about. Now, in terms of item cards, there are a few slightly more unusual ones. We see Spell Tag here. I love Spell Tag. Spell Tag, if it's attached to a Psychic Pokemon and they are KO'd by damage from an opponent's attack, you get to drop 4 damage counters on your opponent's side of the field. And it's really handy for bringing stuff into range. Drop 1 damage counter on a Zoroark, now 4 trainers and you get the KO. Drop 3 damage counters onto a Naganadel, now 2 trainers and you get a KO, etc. It's really nice for bringing Pokemon down to an exact number divisible by 50 so you can get the KO. That's quite nice. And then we've also got 1 copy of Lavender Town. I adore Lavender Town. Lavender Town lets you look at your opponent's hand once during your turn. Well, you do more damage based on how many item cards or trainer cards as a whole are in their hand. Would be nice to know what's in their hand. But only 1 copy because you're also playing 2 copies of Altar of the Moon. It reduces the retreat cost of Pokemon with Psychic Energy attached by 2. Also, Darkness, but you're not playing any Darkness energy, so it's kind of a moot point. It just means that essentially everything in your deck has free retreat, other than Giratina. But then again, Giratina, you attach an energy, its retreat cost becomes 1, you can then discard the energy. So though it doesn't have free retreat, it has a retreat of 1, which is perfectly manageable. And then a slightly more unusual cards. Other than that, it's largely what we would expect. 4 Mysterious Treasure as Pokemon Search, because you're playing a largely Psychic deck, except for Sudowoodo, it's an entirely Psychic deck. 2 copies of Ultra Ball to search out your evolved Pokemon because, well, 4 Mysterious Treasure might not be enough. And 3 copies of Nest Ball. And essentially, this deck gets set up. And you need that. You need your Trubbish and your Inkay and potentially your Mimikyu and Gengar early doors. 9 Pokemon Search is a lot, but this deck is going to get set up. We see 2 copies of Max Potion, and maybe I should have put this in the slightly more unusual category. But then again, you've got a 240 HP Pokemon that gives up free prizes. It's not easy to one-hit KO, unless you end up with something along the lines of a Blacephalon or a Zoroark. So if they can't one-hit KO you, you free retreat with Ultra the Moon, Max Potion the energy away, but then you can get it straight back with Malamar. So in a deck that's playing Ultra the Moon and Malamar, Max Potion becomes kind of stupid good. Couple copies of Choice Band because you're doing extra damage, and extra damage is good. 1 copy of Field Blower to get rid of tools and stadiums. 1 copy of Rescue Stretcher to get your Pokemon back. You won't need to get many Pokemon back often, but maybe you need to recover your Malamar or especially your Garboda, because you are only playing a 2-2 line. Then in terms of supporters, you got Cynthia and Lily as your draw cards of choice. They are the best draw cards in the format. Probably not surprising we're playing those 2. But we do see a couple of Sightseer here, and quite simply, the reason we see Sightseer is because you draw until you've got 5 cards in hand, but before, you get to discard as many cards from your hand as you like. Well, discarding Giratina is good. There's no point benching Giratina. Benching Giratina sucks. If you want Giratina on the bench, discard it, and then use the ability to put it on the bench while getting a bit of damage down. Nice. And then, of course, you want energy in the discard for your Malamar. 3 copies of Guzma, because you want to drag Pokemon off the bench and KO them, especially if there's 1 Pokemon that's a threat. Take it out. You don't want your Tag Team GX going down. And a couple copies of Ace Roller, because actually, you know how we mentioned Max Potion? Yeah, that. To be honest with you. It's the same deal. You need to stop your opponent taking KOs. And look, sometimes they're going to get a KO. It is inevitable. But you can prevent it, which means that anytime it's possible, even a little bit, you need to prevent it. And this combination of Max Potion and Ace Roller just will stop some KOs coming down. Here's a list in full. I like this deck. I like Tag Team GXs, and look, in a month or two I might be bored, as may many of you, by the fact that the format's being overrun by Tag Team GXs, and if we are, we are, and if that's what happens, that's what happens. But right now, I'm just enjoying that we've got new Tag Team GXs, and of the 6 that have been revealed, I've shown you successful, proven to be good lists for 4 of the 6. For anyone that's wondering or forgotten, the 2 which we haven't seen yet are Eevee and Snorlax. I love Snorlax. And Latios and Latias, which makes me really upset, but because it's Baby Daisy's spirit Pokemon. But I'm sure within the next couple of weeks, I will be able to show you those as well. And I'm a little bit excited. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's that time. Tell me what you think about this deck. Go nuts in the comment section, but please do remember the rule. Be nice, would ya? And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at @TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassyPlays, where you can learn about Keyforge and Transformers and other fun games. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.